Welcome to the Homegrown podcast, a place where we share the truth about food and farming from our kitchen to yours. I'm your host, Liz Hazelmeyer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good afternoon.
And together we hope to educate, inspire, and equip you in your pursuit of true nourishment. Today's guest is Will Harest. Will is a fourth-generation cattleman who tends the same land his great-grandfather settled in 1866, known today as White Oak Pastures. Today we're sharing more of Will's story and his new book, A Bold Return to Giving a Damn. Will's actually been on the show before. We're so excited to welcome him back for a second time. Mr. Will Harest, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun last time, and we'll have fun this time.
We did have a blast last time. I was listening to a recording, and we started off by asking you what your favorite type of wine was. And you so graciously said the Yellowtail Syrah, was really your daily go-to. And I was like, you know what? I love that. I love a man who's so settled in what he wants to do. And I just picture you out on your pasture and you're enjoying it. And I love that. But today,
You can see a case of Yellowtail Syrah right there in 1.5 bottle.
see, and I didn't even plan that because we can't even see that on the camera. I love that. You're so prepared. For those who maybe didn't catch the first episode or aren't as familiar with your work at White Oak Pasture, I would love to have you explain a little bit of who you are and where you've come from, especially as your philosophy around farming and agriculture has really taken this huge transformation. So you can start us wherever you want to start in the story, but I'd love to share that with the folks.
So my family has been on this farm, as I've owned and operated this farm since 1866. The first two generations would have farmed in a way that would have been very good for the land and the animals in the community. My father took over the farm post-World War II. He was born in 1920, and he really changed the farm. He modernized it, industrialized, commoditized, and centralized. And under his watch, it went from a polyculture of a lot of different species of animals being raised to a monoculture of cattle. And my dad ran the farm successfully as a cattle monoculture all his life. Went to the University of Georgia in 1972, graduated in 1976 in animal science. And all I ever wanted to do was come back and run a monocultural cattle operation just like my dad had done. I loved it. And I did. And I operated the farm that way for 20 years. In the mid-90s, I made the decision to change things, and I've been changing it ever since for the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. In your book, you do a wonderful job of telling it in great detail, both your dad's perspective and why he changed the farm and what was going on in society during that time. Can you share with us a little bit about what pressures he was facing or what it looked like for him as a farmer?
Almost just like a culture that he was a part of.
Yeah. Oh, movement, really.
Yeah.
I mean, for folks to come in and give them this new type of fertilizer, and it'd be so alluring because it's easy for us in 2024 to look back on your story and think, well, geez, look at all the damage that's done, but none of that was seen. So talk us through what he was going through and what he might have been facing and the ways that he saw that playing out in his own land.
Incredible change from the way farming had been done for many generations prior to that. Under probably the biggest single change is moving to a monoculture.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, the farm raised a lot of different animal species and was very vertically integrated. My great-grandfather and grandfather actually raised cows, hogs, sheep, goats, slaughtered them here on the farm every day, 6 days a week. My great-grandfather and grandfather and their employees got up before day and slaughtered something. It might be a cow, it might be 3 hogs, it might be 200 chickens. It was whatever was ready, but that's what they did. They loaded the meat or poultry onto a mule-drawn wagon and drove it 2 miles up the dirt road to Bluffton, where I'm sitting in the middle of Bluffton right now, and they peddled it. Or they, or an employee did, and they'd come pick up their money on Saturday and do it again. And it was a very vertically integrated polycultural food system, very local, obviously. No refrigeration, no internal combustion engine, so it's very local. No USDA inspection. My dad took over the farm after World War II, and things just changed dramatically. And he moved it from a farm that raised a lot of different species of animals to slaughter, to a monocultural cattle operation. All he raised was cattle, and we didn't slaughter cattle. We sold he sold, and then later I sold live animals direct to industrial feedlots in the Midwest primarily. And that was, there was some exceptions to that, but that was generally the way it was done. And my dad was very cowboy, and I was very cowboy, so we didn't talk much about things we didn't have to talk about, who was going to do what. But I think he really enjoyed and took pride in being a specialist in the cattle business. He was able to become very good at being a cattleman because he didn't have to fool with hogs and sheep and goats and chickens. And certainly he was very good at it and did well, was successful. That's all I ever wanted to do is follow in his footsteps. It was beautiful to me. I changed my mind away from that. And when I did change my mind and did start moving away from it, I was not trying to move back into what my great-grandfather and grandfather did. I was just moving away from something I had gotten tired of. And I was kind of shocked when I realized, damn, this is what we used to do.
Yeah.
It was really unplanned. But after I realized it, then I really worked hard to emulate
it. It almost reconnected you back to those prior generations in a way you never were anticipating. And
I really wished I had been able to ask my dad or granddad or had no great granddad to learn more about that. All that knowledge was gone. We had industrialized.
Yeah. Something for me, the switch, a lot of it went from this direct to consumer model where you're raising the animals, you're butchering them, you're packaging, you're selling it to your community. They didn't have refrigeration, so they're selling it to their local community. This direct to consumer model. Then we went in, as you explained, and these farmers went from generalists to specialists. And so their one thing was like, hey, we're raising the cows. We're going to birth the cows and we're going to raise them until, I don't know, when would they go to a feedlot? Like 12 months, something like that. And that was it. And you had this tiny little speck in the food chain that you were a part of, and that was like your thing. And then now where you've transitioned back to, no, we're going to own every step of the process. And that means that you raise not just one animal, but multiple. You oversee the birth and the death, which I want to get into later in the show, of the animals. And then you got to worry about how you're going to market this thing and package it and send it out. And so you're kind of switching back to this direct to consumer model. But the thing that no one really saw coming was when we shifted away to this direct to consumer is the general population kind of had no idea. We just trusted that the animals were kind of still maybe in good hands, or nothing really had changed. And I think it's the animal welfare piece that's driven a lot of the attention nowadays of why consumers want to see how their meat is being raised specifically. And animal welfare is something you talk about at length in the book. So I'd love to talk about the moment where you're at that gate and you're watching those cattle get loaded up, and it kind of dawns on you like, maybe this isn't the direction I want to go. Talk to us about what that switch looked like in your head.
the life really got a lot more simple. You just had to get good at this very narrow segment of the production chain. And in theory, that seems like a great way for it to be, but it didn't work out well for us. So as we farmers who were specialists, well, I don't care if the commodity is cows or hogs or corn or wheat or oranges, it doesn't matter. When you relegate yourself to the industrial chain, you make yourself vulnerable to having margins squeezed and squeezed and squeezed until it's just not very profitable anymore. It's not very good anymore. And that's what happened to us. My dad did fine as an industrial cattleman, and I did fine early as an industrial cattleman. But as we have seen just talk about cattle, any commodity cattle, as we've seen these industrial beef companies get bigger and bigger and bigger and exercise more and more control, we just got squeezed tighter and tighter and tighter in terms of margins till it just wasn't much return anymore. I think something like 85% of the beef in this country is produced by 4 companies. So it's just such a disproportionate relationship of the people out here in the field producing calves and the big meat companies that are buying them. So it's just business. I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think anybody's out to break us. It's just a matter of margins have shrunk and shrunk and shrunk until they just about don't exist anymore. And it's true on the consumer end. The product has been made cheaper and cheaper and cheaper from a production model. And it's impacted quality in many cases. And we'll talk about that a long time. The industrial food production system has caused food to be just incredibly cheap. I would say obscenely cheap. But it did it by casting cost off into other areas. We could talk about it all day. But, there's the Gulf of Mexico is about 80 miles that way downriver. And there's a huge dead zone there. It used to be a thriving oystering region, and they won't allow oystering there anymore. The oyster beds are depleted, not because we took too many oysters, it's because we washed too much chemical fertilizer and pesticides and other agricultural waste down the river, and that cleanup will cost millions or billions of dollars. But that won't be paid by the farmers or the pesticide companies or the fertilizer companies. It'll be paid by all of us. And we can talk about many, many, many costs like that went to make food obscenely cheap, but everybody's got to pay it. I mean, the costs were spun off out of the system.
Mm-hmm. What's another example of that to really paint it in folks' heads? I'd love to dive in.
Another example would be pesticides in the environment. They find Roundup anywhere they want to look for it.
Yeah.
Another example would be species extinction. We holistic producers believe that every species in an indigenous system has a role. Some of it we can see very plainly, others we can't. But I think that every indigenous species, whether it's plant or animal or microbe, has a role. We've driven something like 50% of the species into extinction or near extinction. So where's the cost of that being borne? It's being realized in cheap food. It's being borne by all of us.
Mm-hmm.
There are many others, climate change. There's just so many things we can talk about that are costs that this industrial food production system has thrust onto the planet. But it manifests itself in cheap food, obscenely cheap food. But who's going to cover those costs? And the answer is everybody.
Mm.
Yeah. It's like we've these unintended consequences that are just now, I feel like, being realized. It can be overwhelming because it kind of feels like, how in the world do we turn this thing around? Because now you do have a population who is conditioned to be able to buy really cheap meat and really cheap milk and cheap eggs, and every packaged food, it has some sort of corn or soy derivative in it, and there's this system that's built up, and it's like, how do you turn it around fast enough to save the next generation or the land? So yeah.
Believe anything the doctor said, you just did.
Mm.
If the doctor said, take this pill, you took the pill.
Mm-hmm.
There was no discussion. And the result, when she was very old, she was taking just a handful of pills every day. I think that probably contributed to her demise as opposed to prolonged her life. And my wife, who was born in 1954, I'm not supposed to say that, but she was, believes that did believe, less now, that anything in the grocery store is fine, just fine. If it weren't fine, it wouldn't be in that grocery store.
Yeah.
I have daughters who help me run this business who are about your age probably, and they question everything. They can't read enough. Because the label's not big enough to put all they want to know. So my point is, generationally, we trusted a medical profession. I'm not anti-modern medicine. I am not. But I don't want to take every pill that every doctor says I probably ought to take. They think I probably ought to take. And I think the same thing has happened in food. And I think we're getting smarter about it. I think it takes generations, not years.
Yeah, I agree with you.
What do you think is unique about this generation that we're questioning so much?
Could you turn your volume up a little bit?
Sure. Can you hear me better now?
A little better now, yeah.
What do you think is unique about this generation that's causing people to question as much as they are?
Well, I think that it's probably sophistication. The information is so much better out there. The computers, and they just you can know as much as you want to know pretty easily.
Mm.
I think that it's experience. I think that we've been told, the example I just gave, the medical profession, society trusted it implicitly until it didn't.
Mm.
And I think that food's the same way. Again, even my wife, who's a smart woman, kind of believes that if it's at that grocery store, it's fine. Well, no, it's not. My daughters don't believe that. I side with my daughters. So, I think that as we become more well-informed, more sophisticated, question, we're told, do a better job questioning.
That's super good. We were discussing cattle with another guest at one point. We were talking about generational information that's passed down from cattle. I'm just curious about your thoughts about this. What's the importance of even from like an animal perspective of sticking with past generations to learn from them?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I'll tell you one thing. So when my great grandfather came here in 1866, he brought a herd of cattle with him. We don't have any nice photographs. I wish we did. But we do know that those cattle would have been cracker cattle. The cattle are not indigenous to the United States. The first Spanish explorers brought Spanish cattle over here, and they went feral, and cattle were here, and the cattle my great grandfather would have brought to this farm would have been the descendants of those feral Spanish cattle. And I know what they look like. I've done some research, seen the pictures, And we somewhere along, and he saved males and females and turned them back out, perpetuate the herd. And my grandfather did the same thing. I think my father is the generation that started buying purebred bulls and bringing them onto the farm to improve the herd. And I did, I know I did as well. So that when that started, whether it was my dad or my granddad, they would keep females but buy improved bulls, Hereford, Angus, Charolais, Brahman, whatever, and put them with them. And it was kind of like a flavor of the month club. As an adult, I'd go to a bull sale and say, "What kind of bull is that? I've never seen one." It'd say whatever from wherever. So I'll take all of those. I bring them back, and bam, a new genetic line was injected into the herd. And it's a long story, but about 10 years ago, for a couple of reasons, I chose to not castrate my male cattle. It was a marketing decision on my part. And the economics for the marketing decision was just okay. But what it did was I realized I was raising better bulls than I was buying.
Mm.
You know, I had 1,000 or so mama cows at that time. There were a few more. I was raising 500 bulls a year. I was castrating them when they were 3 months old, so I didn't know how good they were. And then I'd go buy bulls for $3, $4, $5,000 a piece, and I was from people that didn't have but 100 cows, so I could pick the best out of 500. They were picking the best out of 20. So I'm now saved my own females and males. I'm turning them back out, so I'm creating a breed of cattle that's suited to this ecosystem. And I can see it generation to generation. They're just getting better and better. And I love it. I'm taking the existing genetics that are in my herd and folding it back upon itself until it creates a consistent breed.
So there's like natural selection that occurs, and you're just kind of managing that and stewarding that selection to improve it. It's not just for the meat quality, but also is it behavioral? Like what are some of the things that you see in these cows that's improving as you manage that? I don't what do we call
the breeding
the
process?
Breed, yeah.
Yeah. So that's good. That's a great question. You know, it manifests itself in the appearance of the cattle. You know, I was buying these really tall cattle that were bred to go to the feedlot, and now I'm saving cattle and they're becoming shorter and stockier and rounder. So it takes all I can do to be 5'10", and I weigh 240, maybe a little lower than that. My son-in-law is 6'5", and he's gained some weight, but when he first came here, he didn't weigh about 180 pounds. And so I would tell him, we want bulls that look like me. We don't want bulls that look like you. But when you have that many to pick from, you know, we're raising 700-800 bulls a year, picking 50-50 females and males. And you can pick the best ones of them, and you're not going to save but another 20 maybe a year. You can just pick the very best. And so I see them becoming more efficient. I have not had to pull, when we have to help give birth, we call that pulling a calf. Whereas I used to have to pull a lot of calves, maybe it's 1 or 2 or 3 a year.
Oh, wow.
They are not there. I'm just so pleased with what the animals are doing.
It's amazing when you let nature run its course and you become an observer of it instead of merely trying to control it. That's also a conversation we were having with another gentleman who raises cows. I'm curious, just because I have never farmed a day in my life, what happens to a bull when you castrate him? Does his now mannerisms change? Were you missing out on a part of the herd that would have been there by castrating the animal?
Well, bulls are castrated primarily, there's several reasons, but primarily uh, for behavior. They do gain weight a little bit better. If you're not manufacturing testosterone and semen that's going just fat,
Mm.
a little better, a little more efficiency there. The main reason is behavioral. When you buy a bunch of bulls from different sources and put them together, they've got to figure out who's the boss every day.
Mm.
And there's a lot of pushing and potentially expending energy, getting hot, potentially getting sick. There's just, they can hurt each other. You can have a lot of things happen. In my case, I have not experienced much of that because I raised them myself. They're born here. So when they weigh 200 pounds, they push each other around. By the time they weigh 1,000 pounds, they pretty much just like the kids in the 7th grade. They pretty much decided who's the badass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. And so that kind of like dominance, that
Yeah.
dominance is going to be carried over, and there's an efficiency even there
Yeah.
of not having to deal with, potentially isolating a, bad behavior kind of student, and then
A bully.
a bully.
And so AI to you all means artificial intelligence. AI to me means artificial insemination. I've been to school and learned how to artificially inseminate a cow.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's very common is for semen companies. There are companies that are in the business of marketing semen from bulls who are freaks of nature.
Mm-hmm.
They have a ribeye as big as my hat. Whatever attributes you're looking for. You go to the stud book and you find the attribute that you want, and you buy so many straws of that semen and you insert them in your cows when they're ovulating. You don't need a bull. And I used to do it, and I was proud of my ability to do it, and I thought it was great until I realized how backwards that is, because those semen companies select bulls that are freaks of nature. They're extremely tall, or extremely broad, or have extremely big ribeye areas, or gain weight extremely fast. Well, in nature, when a being has an extreme ability here, they lack something somewhere else.
Mm.
Now, I was buying that semen and inseminating my cows with it to get this one attribute that I thought I wanted so badly. Today, because I saved my own bulls, I can afford to have a bunch of them out.
Mm-hmm.
And I choose to put more bulls out there than normal. And you know what bulls breed the most cows? The ones that feel the best and are eating the best and moving the best. And I used to think that if I turn 50 bulls out of 1,000 cows, which is about, they'd all get about 20 calves apiece. No. No. I've not done this, but a friend of mine did DNA testing. He took hairs from the tail head of the calves and sent them away. And you may have one bull that instead of getting 20 calves, got 100. And many bulls that don't get any. Well, guess what I want my herd to be dominated by? I want it to come out of that bull that got 100 calves.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just so many things that when we broke apart agricultural production into silos, nutrition and breeding and genetics, and we ceased to look at the whole program. And, this is a whole program. It's like watching a baseball game through slats on a wooden fence. All you can see is the pitcher. All you can see is the catcher. But, you need to be able to see the field.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good. And there's a funny business principle here. And it's so funny. I relate to your dad in that, and you, and many farmers, I believe, business oftentimes makes more sense in your head when you feel as though you have more control.
Mm.
When you feel as though you can control more things, you feel safer. You feel like you have more security. And oftentimes when you look at your P&L or your balance, or your cash on hand and your expenses, and the first thing you're going to look at is, what's my core offering? What's making me the most money? And this is why people tend to go in on the business side. I can't speak as a farmer, but I'm guessing towards one line of business, and they want to do that one line of business really, really well. They want to sell that line of business. They want to differentiate in some capacity in that singular line of business. And then they want to increase efficiencies around that singular line of business so that they can increase margin, right? And what we see in your book is how your dad was, in my opinion, a very smart businessman. And I would never look at your dad, culturally, the context of the situation he was in at that time was very much, why wouldn't you use all these inputs?
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't you grow the grass faster? Why wouldn't you utilize these feedlots and things to grow cows faster and make a more desirable product? And on top of all that, if we can utilize more inputs and cut down on some of the varying costs of labor, those are all smart business decisions. And what I think you're finding out, and you did find out, is farming doesn't necessarily go, the rules of business are different in farming because of the longevity of it. And if you don't mind, if you speak to some of the longevity, I had a question here. You mentioned in the book this idea of there being 60 harvests left. Now, at the time that you were writing the book, maybe that's 2-3 years ago, maybe we're at 56, 57 harvests left. Can you speak to that? This is a term that we don't talk about very often here in the suburbs, but what does that mean to you? Where do we get this information from? And what should we as consumers be thinking about this idea of 60 harvests left?
That's great. And I'll start out by saying, and I want to comment on this. I want to start out by saying that the 60 harvests are what's said. I don't know what that number is. I think there is a finite number. I don't know if it's 60 or 40 or 20 or 100. I don't know that.
Okay.
That 60 is talked about often in the environmental community. Now, what I'm convinced of is that we have a finite number of harvests left. And the reason is because we are doing so much damage to the environment with the usage of these tools. You mentioned my dad, and my dad tell the stories before I was born. He tells the story post World War II. A fertilizer salesman coming to Bluffton and giving had a fish fry or something, barbecue or something. But he gave all the farmers a 10-pound bag of ammonium nitrate fertilizer and asked them, gave it to them for free. His request was, go home, put this on your pasture, wet it, and don't look at it for 3 or 4 days, then look at it. And when my dad did that, it was incredible. The grass that looked good otherwise, where the ammonium nitrate was significantly higher, significantly greener, significantly better. And he said, wow, I want that on every acre of land I got. And he started putting ammonium nitrate or another chemical nitrogen source on every acre. And I came home and did it myself. So for 60 years, we put ammonium nitrate or some other chemical nitrogen fertilizer on every acre. Now, what he didn't see is that when he put that ammonium nitrate on that virgin land that never had chemical fertilizer, it made the grass grow like gangbusters, but it also adversely affected the microbial population that was there. And it oxidized the organic matter in the soil that was there. And it didn't just wax it, but it damaged it. But he couldn't see that. He could just see that grass.
Mm-hmm.
He couldn't see the unintended consequences. And what we're talking about here is unintended consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, ammonium nitrate was chemically discovered in the 1880s, I think. It wasn't discovered in 1945. But it was so expensive, nobody used it. The governments in free world and Europe and everywhere else built munitions factories to fight World War II. And those munitions factories could be converted over to make ammonium nitrate after the war, so it was cheap. So, and they hired people to get out and sell it. So that's how that happened.
Wow.
And I can go through many different technologies that have caused horrible unintended consequences, did a great deal of good in the short run.
Mm-hmm.
That's how the game's played. But in the long run, it caused unintended consequences that were bad. And we keep doing that, and we've reached a point there's only X amount of time left. And is it 60 years or 70 or 80 or 40? I don't know. But I know it's true. And we can go down the list. I can list many of them. And I'll say this: when those fertilizer salesmen came out from town in 1945 to sell ammonium nitrate, I don't believe they thought they were doing anything adverse. They didn't say, "I know this looks good, but it's really damaging these people's land, but they won't know it for a long time, so it's okay." I don't think that's the way that worked. But I think it's the way it works now. I think that we big technology companies have become so good at this technology research that they are developing and selling products like ammonium nitrate, boost production, but cause another problem, which enables them to sell another product, which will boost production and cause another problem. And I think that these are smart people, and I think they know what they're doing, and I think they're making a lot of money doing it. And I think that we farmers have been very slow to pick up on that.
Well, it's interesting too, because you mentioned how you went to college and studied animal science, and they confirmed this new shift of farming. They were teaching you these things. And I guess what I was wondering in the book was, like, did animal science or any sort of academic version of farming and agriculture not exist before World War II? Because wouldn't they have taught what maybe your great-grandfather would have taught you? Or was this a new program that just happened to come along perfectly timed?
Anyway, you folks ask good questions. So what was animal science when I went to the University of Georgia? Had previously been animal husbandry. But animal husbandry reached a point it was not cool anymore. Husbandry is very cyclical. Husbandry. Animal science is very linear. And that's what happened. The husbandry change, or the art of producing animals became the science of producing animals. They went from being cyclical to linear. I got the big tip for you. It's cyclical. There's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
It is cyclical. Now, you can do some things to try to make it increasingly linear. And in the short run, it'll be beneficial. In the long run, it'll have unintended consequences that cost. Urinating in your pants will make you warm, but it's not a good long-term strategy.
Very true.
Hey, that sounds like
Every 4-year-old knows that.
Podcast title right there.
Urinating in those pants will make you warm. No, and I think you do a wonderful job. Obviously, we're talking about the book today, so we're going to keep bringing it up. And if you haven't read it, what are you doing? Just go get it and buy it, because it's from Will's perspective, and I just love the way that you continue to generously explain this very subtle shift, because for folks like me and Joey, who we live in the suburbs, we have never, well, you kind of raised some veggies, but no, we've never, we don't touch soil on a regular basis. We wouldn't know what the inner workings of the food system, specifically with meat production, would look like without someone very clearly and explicitly saying, this is what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And even you saying the words, it's cyclical, not not just linear,
yeah.
as science would conveniently have you believe. That right there is the reason why we're looking at an end date to harvesting on our land, because we have just abused the cycles of nature. So I don't know. Do you want to get into the different cycles? Do you want to talk about even how your farm is different and how you're honoring those? I mean, there's so much we could go into here. I kind of just want to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So the cycles of nature, there are many cycles, and I don't think any of us know all of them. We know the obvious ones, the energy cycle, from the sun, the water cycle from the rain, the carbon cycle, breathing in ammonium nitrate, breathing oxygen back out, microbial cycle, the grazing cycle. There are just so many cycles. And there's a symbiotic relationship between all these species, the indigenous species that work together. What benefits me, benefits you. We can talk a lot about those things. And we moved, and that is the cyclical side. Now we moved that whole process into something very linear. The production of cattle, production of corn, doesn't matter. It's very linear. And we try to fight the cycles of nature. When I was an industrial cattleman, I think I was pretty good at it. And I went to the pasture every single day, and I was literally looking for something to kill. I wanted a monoculture of Tifton 85 Bermuda grass, which is a hybrid plant that I wanted to grow. I wanted to be grazed by cattle, not grasshoppers, not deer. And if I was actively looking for something that was not Tifton 85 Bermuda grass being eaten by something that was not a cow. And if I found it, I knew what side to kill them with. Side means kill. Homicide, insecticide, pesticide, herbicide, nematicide. Side means kill. Mm-hmm. And I was accomplished, educated, and experienced in killing things. And I looked for something to kill every day, and every day I could find something. And what I came to realize is when I kill something, it caused me to need to kill something else, because I was taking out the natural antagonist that was protecting what was going on out there, that predator-prey cycle. So that's what happened.
Shared a story in the book of the flies and how a salesman might come out with new fly repellents you could put onto the tags of the cattle's ear to kind of prevent flies. And man, he talks about, or Will, you talk about in your book that you get the first round of this stuff and you're like, man, you'd think that there was no more flies. And like the next year, it was like I'm being eaten alive by flies because they came back with a vengeance, and I had to go search for a new product because now the flies had adapted, and all the flies that didn't get impacted by that first repellent or side, if you will, now are kind of like mutate, like they've almost
super flies.
Yeah, you got like these super flies now that are out, and so it created this system where you were almost like now that you got into the cycle of going after the flies, now you're all in, or you're going to get overrun because you've created almost a bigger problem if you don't keep attacking them.
I fought flies all summer long, every summer, I had no idea I was fighting flies because I was giving my cattle dewormer, kill the worms in the system. And that dewormer was coming out their back end into manure, and that in the dewormer residue was killing the insects that kill fly larvae in the manure. So I was poisoning something that was meant to help me, and I can give you many examples of that. I mean, there's just so many things that I was choosing to take out in the natural system because I could see the adversarial part of it. But then when I take them out, I would find out, there's another problem here. But my reaction was never, let's let those flourish again. It was, let's kill that. Let's kill that. Of course, all of these products that I was buying to kill these perceived pests was generating profit at a technical company that was manufacturing the pesticides. So it's a really bad system.
It's a bad system, and I also feel for the folks who are in it, because as you have shown, you're either all in or you have to literally make your own way. And the fact that when you began to pull out of the system, you then were forced to figure out, how in the world am I going to be able to process these animals? Like, you had to build your own USDA inspected facility on your land because you so far opted out of the system. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because I think it's easy for consumers to be like, well, everyone should just be Will Harest and follow his ways. And I do agree, there's so much people can learn from you, but also remember that a lot of these people are generations deep in this way of thinking. And they're going to have to use a lot of time and probably a lot of capital to get out of that. And so what were some of the ways that you have been able to remove yourself out of that system and successfully thrive?
But that's a great question too. I have incredible compassion for people who are in the industrial commodity system and want to get out of it, because it is very hard to get out of it. And I was able to get out of it, but I started 25 years ago, and it's harder now than it was then. And I had inherited a nice working farm with 1,000 acres of land and no debt, so I had economically some advantages. Had I had not had equity, I couldn't have done it. We went through some lean times, so I feel nothing but compassion for people who are in the commodity system and want to get out, and it's hard for them to do it. We talked about this briefly before. If you're a commodity producer, any commodity, you occupy this one little space where you just produce and you sell it to a further processor, usually a really large company, and it's compared to what we do, it is simpler. It's a much simpler way of making a living, but you're very vulnerable to being squeezed margin-wise. I'm not saying I can't be squeezed margin-wise. I can, but it's easier if you're just producing soybeans and selling soybeans to a soybean processor. So in our case here, I'll tell you a little more, maybe more you want to know. We probably got nearly $30 million in assets in this farm. That's the farm, the processing, customer facing stuff we got. We've got about $10 million in debt. So we got about $20 million in equity. And we've got a lot of experience in operating it. I think we do a reasonably good job. But despite having that much equity and that much experience, it's a very break-even-ish business. So if you are a young man or woman that's farming somewhere and you don't have much equity, it's incredibly today. It's
Wow.
incredibly difficult to break out.
Mm.
Urge people to do it, and it can be done, but it's hard to do. My hope is that people with resources can find ways to help. I almost said young people. They ain't got to be young. Being young is handy. It's nice, but to help people to get out of that. It's you mentioned land a little earlier, and I'm really worried about that. We could talk about land a long time, but land that's being traded these days are going into the hands of very, very, very rich people or company or corporations that are not farmers looking for a farm to put on it. And I'm going to talk about land just a minute. Can I do that?
Do it.
Please do.
So land is so important. And land is one of the very few non-depreciating assets. You got land, precious jewels, precious metals, maybe art. You got a pretty picture behind you there. I don't know much about art, but maybe art. But certainly jewels, gold, land. And they're non-depreciating. That means they pretty much last forever or expected to last forever. And the return when you buy those is very low because it's going to last forever. And when you buy it, you've got to pay for it in the case of land, 15 or 20 years. It's just very difficult for a person who has no equity to buy land, pay for it in 15 or 20 years when it's going to last forever.
Mm-hmm.
But you got to pay for it in 15 years. That's what the ball 20 maybe, but depends on the bank. So it's reached a point that's just incredibly hard for people who want to farm to buy land. And there's got to be something worked out with these people or entities who are buying the land to allow farmers to farm. That can look a lot of different ways, but there's not too much out going on right now. It's worrying to me.
Well, isn't it something about Bill Gates is one of the most prominent farm landowners now in the United States? And it's like, what is he going to do with that? You know, I wouldn't say I align with him on a philosophy level about the environment, and that's concerning.
Well, I've been criticized for being critical of that situation with Mr. Gates, and I'm not critical of Mr. Gates personally. I don't know him.
Yeah.
But Mr. Gates is of the business class that feels that technology is the answer for just about everything.
Yeah.
I understand why he thinks that, and that's how he got where he is. I am respectful of that. But I'm also convinced that technology, which again is very linear, when it's applied to this cyclical business of working with nature to produce food, causes unintended consequences. And when you've got a person like Mr. Gates controlling that much land, that just makes it that much harder for some poor farmer somewhere to bid against it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to go a piece of land that joins me and go to the sale and Bill Gates is getting out of his Mercedes. I hate to do that.
It's not the vibe. So it's kind of like folks need to not lose grasp of stewarding the land we have in the US. Like we have finite amounts of land. We're not going to get more. But the more that control of the land kind of slips into these larger organizations or these folks with a lot of cash but maybe a different philosophy, then we do have the issue of, okay, well, how are we going to move forward, and what does this look like in terms of how many years we can harvest off of this land? If I'm hearing you correctly, that's kind of your current concern, because your farm is your farm, and other folks who maintain land, they're doing what they can, but there's not really a whole lot of new generation farmer folks who have the ability to acquire land because it's just so dang expensive right now. which makes sense. And that's something I haven't really considered, is the slipping away of even opportunity to buy land. So that's an interesting point that you bring up.
It is terrible.
Yeah.
So my land sits right beside a farm, steel farm. It's very, very industrial. And the organic matter on my farm is over 5%. The organic matter on the neighboring farm is 0.5%. It's a 10x difference. And let me tell you what that means. A 1% organic matter will absorb about one inch rainfall. So my farm will absorb a 5 inch, actually a little over 5 inch rainfall if it comes slow. Well, not if it comes in 30 minutes, but if it comes over a 48-hour period. My neighbor's farm will absorb a 1/2 inch rainfall.
Mm.
Now we get 5 inch rainfalls. That's not uncommon in coastal plains. So what that means is my neighbor loses 4.5 inches of that. And when he loses it, of course, it carries chemical fertilizer and pesticide down to the Chattahoochee, to the Flint River, Chattahoochee River, to the Gulf of Mexico. So, there's just the care of the land is so much more important because it is a non-depreciating asset. It will last forever.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about, because land is perpetual, and I know Joey has some questions, this idea of legacy and how you pass on something like white oak to the next generation. And how did that look for you and your dad? I know you talk about that in the book a little bit, but then how are you doing that with your daughters? And what are some things that you're having to think through as you make that transition?
We talk about that a lot. And so I am the 4th generation to own this farm. I mean, that's pretty unusual. The old saying is the first generation makes it, the second generation keeps it, the third generation loses it. And there's a lot of examples of that out there. Mm. In our case, that didn't happen, and possibly because my dad was an only child, born in 1920, and I'm an only child, born in 1954. So there wasn't that splitting up, dividing. And sadly, in our society, it's become very common to say, well, I'm going to make out my will, and I got 5 children, so I'm going to leave everybody 20% of the farm. Mm. Well, there may be one or two people farming, but everybody got 20% of the farm. And the guy and gal that was living in Atlanta, Chicago, and New York wanted their money. And the one or two that was farming couldn't pay, so they had to sell the farm. That's happened. I've seen that happen so many times. So I have 3 daughters. They're all sweethearts. They're wonderful people. Love them. All of them pay for all of them, get a college education. I'm married. 2 chose to come back here to the farm, and the farm will go to the 2 that came back to run it. Mm-hmm. The other one's not very happy about that, and I can't help it. But I think it's the right thing to do. Those Europeans left everything left the estate to the eldest son. Hmm. Now, I think that the eldest son part was a cop-out. But I think leaving it all to whoever's going to stay and see about it is the right way to do it. Hmm. I think that's how you make an asset perpetual. I'm the 4th generation. My 2 daughters and their spouses are working here. 2 of them and their spouses are working here every day. They've got 5 children who are my grandchildren. And I told you what I'm going to do with the farm. I've told them, don't divide it up equally among everybody. Please don't do that. Mm. Give it to who is going to take care of it and perpetuate it.
Mm. Can I ask a personal question of if that 3rd daughter wanted to come back? I mean, is there room for her? Is that an option? And she's just is it a voluntary, I don't want to be a part of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is voluntary. If she wanted to come back, my vote would be we work it out.
Yeah.
Now, it wouldn't be fair for her to come back and have as much equity as the two daughters and their spouses who've been working here for 10 or 15 years.
Right.
And I don't know exactly how that needs to look. But now my vote would be, oh yeah, we're gonna work this out equitably.
Mm. That's such an interesting perspective. Do you have other people in your community who see that the same way, or are you pretty unique in how you're approaching it?
I don't know. I hadn't had that discussion many times. I think it may be not real common.
Not common.
When you're parenting, so when you're parenting your kids and you're raising them to be capable of managing an operation like you're in today, Elizabeth and I, we have family businesses, not farms, but businesses that we're a part of. I actually work closely with my dad, and there's a very interesting dance that you play when you are handing off a business or a farm, I'm guessing. And what are some of the things that you do as a parent of a farm like White Oak Pastures to help prepare your kids to be capable of kind of taking the reins?
Several stories I can tell you about that. I never, when my children were coming up, I was farming very industrially. And I would have bet you just about anything they wouldn't have come back. My I had three daughters. They didn't go farm with me. They went to dancing lessons and softball and tennis and whatever little girls did. Their mama raised them. We all lived together, but I was running the farm. She was raising the children. And I never dreamt they'd come back. And when I made the changes I made from industrial to what we do now, I did not do that to entice them to come back, but it did. Two of the three wanted to come back. And I was amazed at how well we've gotten along. I'm not going to tell you it's all sweetness and light, but it's incredibly better than my dad. So I told you, my dad was an only child. I was an only child. We were best friends, business partners, father, son, like brothers. We could hunt together, fish together, eat together, drink together. When it came time to work, it was nose to nose. Two alpha male cowboys. It was ugly. I tell people, my mother left the kitchen table crying 10,000 times. And when my dad had been gone a long time, when my first daughter wanted to come back, and I can remember thinking, man, I don't know if I can do this again or not. But it has been completely different. I don't know if it's gender difference, probably because I am such a super nice guy. I think that's what it is. But for whatever reason, we just don't have much trouble.
That's good.
Two sisters had a little trouble initially, but they got past it. And now, the way we run this business, everybody's got businesses that they're in charge of. In fact, and they're very different businesses. In fact, I can tell you all about that. But the fact is, if they're too busy to fuss. I mean, they got stuff to do. They both have a lot of people working for them. Anyway, it works out well.
Were there things that you would teach your daughters specifically when they came back and they showed interest in being in the farm that you felt like was mandatory information that they would need to know in order to run the farm someday?
There probably should have been. I mean, I was still busy getting this thing off the ground. I did not put that kind of thought and energy and attention into it. I probably should have done better. Both of my daughters have mentioned how when they first came back here, they were very intimidated, not by me. By the time they came back, I had a bunch of employees. And the employees were in management and smart people and creating a return, creating a contribution. And the daughter came back and was looking for something to do, and they wanted to work, but they just didn't. They both had an awkward period of time in which they were figuring out what their role was. And both of them talked today about how awkward that was. This was a long time ago. They're still talking about it. And I probably should have done better in getting them up to speed in a position. And I just kind of let that happen naturally. I don't know exactly what I could have, should have done. Should have done something.
Well, it sounds like a lot of that progress has been made, which is great, right? And it sounds like, farms and businesses are going to do what they do best, and that's you're gonna jump in and you're gonna learn really quick. And if you get to work and you find your place, next thing you know, now they're so busy that they don't have time to fuss, right? Because I'm guessing they don't question where their place is today. So
that's exactly what you said.
Yeah,
they're too busy to fuss, and they got somebody else. They got somebody else to fuss with.
Yeah, that's true. They have their own teams that they're now managing, and so they've got other people.
Something super unique about White Oak Pastures is the slaughterhouse and facility that you have on site, correct? And we were discussing this idea, Elizabeth and I, of field harvesting, which, as we understand it, is not legal unless you have a facility like yours, which is still not field harvesting. I don't reckon.
Right. No.
Can you?
Possibly deer maybe I think are a little different, but cows, hogs, sheep, goats, poultry are by law have to be inspected to be sold. There's a lot of detail in that law, but you've got to have a pretty much, that's the broad statement. You pretty much got to have a USDA inspected facility to slaughter, process, and market those species. When I built my processing plant, I don't think there was but one other on-farm processing plant in the country. I think that Prather Ranch in California was an on-farm processor. And I think they were the only one I could find at the time. And I think there's several. Now, they're not a lot now. They're not nearly enough now. But there are more than there was. And I hope there'll be more. It's just so doggone expensive.
This idea of field harvesting, there's some ideas floating around the value it can potentially bring when it comes to stress on the animal and having them in a scenario where they are harvested, possibly in a situation where they're not pushed into a facility and stressed out for long periods of time or shipped away on a truck. And Will, curious on your thoughts about the death of animals and kind of the optimal way of doing that.
Sort of question whether or not that's more humane or not. It depends on, I guess it depends on how good a shot you are. If you're able to take the animal out first time with a shot, probably is.
Right.
But, I don't know who's that good a shot. So the way, when I built I told you I was one of the first ones to build my plant, and I built my plant before Dr. Temple Grandin became so famous. Do you know that name, Temple Grandin? Temple Grandin is a autistic professor at Colorado State University. And she is a brilliant woman. There's been a movie made about her, and she's written some books. She's a brilliant woman. But she is the master of animal welfare, knowing how animals see things, over to autism, I guess. She designed our system at White Oak Pastures, and I couldn't get her today. She's gotten way too high in the pecking order. But back then, she and I were both young, and I was able to hire her to design my facility.
Wow. And
animals flow through there like water through a pipe. I mean, it's just amazing. Now, I should tell you that we don't slaughter, if we're slaughtering cattle, we don't slaughter but 25 cattle a day. Now, big industrial plants will slaughter thousands of cattle per hour. So there's no comparison in what we do. To have a plant that big, it's got to be sprawling, and the animals are in it for a long time, working their way in. My cattle are in and out. I mean, it's the bad news is it's very inefficient. It costs a lot to slaughter a plant like that. The good news is that the animal welfare is very good. They go in, the term is render them senseless with a captive bolt. It's a device that drives a steel rod into the area of the brain where the sensory receptors are. And you can get the animals in there, and you can get to them real good, not like you got to shoot. And when you do that, they go down like a sack of potatoes. And I hear people say there's no pain at all. Well, I don't say that. I don't As soon as they go down, you can touch the eye and they don't blink, which makes me think that the lights are out. But it is what it is. Then they're hoisted up on the lift by the back feet. The heart is pierced. They die of cardiac arrest when all the blood flows out. So I don't know. It is slaughter. That's what it is. And I don't want to oversimplify it, but I'll just say this. I've been with people when they died. When I go, I'd like to go like my cows go. If I could, I don't want to die for a long time. When I do, that captive bolt and pierce my heart, we do it like that.
Yeah, there's no way to sugarcoat the harvesting of an animal. Truthfully, you're killing it. But I like the way you discuss in your book. Every life comes from previous death, so you really got to get comfortable with that. But I do think there is something to say about how industrialized meat production, it absolutely is a stressful environment. I think that's even one of the reasons where you were like, hey, I don't like shipping these cows off for this 30-hour car ride on these big trains out to their processing plant. Is there something we can do differently? That was one of the first switches in your brain that you talk about. And I had never, before kind of having these recent conversations, I'd always focused on, well, how's the animal raised? How are they cared for? How are they living? But a huge piece of the quality of the end product is, how did they die? And that's something I don't think a lot of consumers are aware of quite yet, because we don't know. We don't know how that process can look. And we don't know how that process is supposed to look. And then we go into this whole argument of, well, what does it look like in the wild? Or what does it look like if you're a hunter? And like you mentioned, Will, how good of a shot are you? I mean, Joey resonates with that.
Yeah.
It's not always a perfect shot.
That's why they call it hunting.
And
they don't call it slaughter.
Yeah. So I do think even your explanation there is important. And I think that the section in the book that talks about how you slaughter and how that looks different, it does actually make an impact on the quality of the meat. And it makes the whole title of the book click for me. A bold return to giving a damn. Either you care about how your food was raised and then killed and how it will be returned to the land, or you don't. And if you don't, that's your own thing. You're not trying to convince anyone. But you're saying, man, there's a reason to care about these things because they have real implications.
Well, the most vehement vegetarian vegan in the world eats is something that used to be alive. It might be a head of lettuce for them. It might be a cow for me. It might be a chicken for you. But everything we eat for nutrition used to be alive. And I've been with, I've seen a lot of animals taken down in nature. It's not painless. I found cattle that coyotes had gotten to, and I won't want to get into it, but it's just there's horrible instances of pain and suffering in in eating food and in finding nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And we do the best we can. And we think about it a lot. We talk
Mhm.
about
Mhm. I'm interested, since the book has come out, what has the response been, and what have you kind of seen in the market? Are you encouraged by the way consumers are responding? Do we still have more room to grow? How are you feeling in general about the status of kind of this regenerative agricultural movement?
it. My daughter knows all about it. She does that very, very well. She would be the best person to answer that question. I don't
Mm.
keep up with a lot of that stuff. But, I won't be writing another book. I can tell you that. I'm out of the book writing business. One trick, Tony. We'll sell 20-something $million worth of product a year. And we've been selling 20-something $million worth of product a year for a long time. I don't want to get any bigger. That's as big as I need to be. I don't necessarily want to be that big, but I got to be because I built a processing plant and I have debt. So I got to sell $20-something $million worth of product a year so I can make my business work.
Mm.
Now, this gets down to the question, I think, is currently we sell $20-something $million worth of product in 48 states. And I want to sell $28 million worth of product here. Not Bluffton, Georgia, but as near here as I can. I don't want to ship meat to 48 states to compete with other farmers that want to do this in those states. I want to be I want to be a food producer for as small a geographic area as I can afford to be, and still selling as much stuff as I need to make my business cash flow. So we're doing we're doing okay. It's a very low return business. I don't even care much. I mean, we're doing what we want to do. There will be a business here to leave to my children and my grandchildren if they want to come and run it. They won't ever be rich. I don't want them to be rich. I want them to have to get up and work. Debt. We have debt, and I kind of like debt. Debt gets your butt out of the bed in the morning. That's what happens to the children of really successful people. They don't have to get up in the morning. They can lay in the bed. I want my children to have to get up.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. We have to get up in the morning, to be very clear. And I agree with that. I think there's some very valuable benefits to having some skin in the game, right? Whatever you're doing in life, when you get some skin in the game, when you put some money down, when you get some debt on the balance sheet, next thing you know, you're getting up in the morning, right? And you're thinking about it at night, and your brain gets activated in a more effective way than it would have without a little bit of that skin in the game. So
Just open up in the morning, it is 1 nanosecond before my feet hit the floor. It's not to go jog. Just go see about some stuff I got to see about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I want my children to be that way. I want them to, I don't want them to not get to sleep at night because they got so much debt. I want them to have enough debt when they wake up in the morning and put their butt to work.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. Anything else?
That's all my questions.
Yeah. Anything else, Will, you wanted to share or talk about in your book that we didn't cover yet today?
Y'all are good interviewers, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on here and talk with you. Today, you want to know, you asked me, but me knowing what you want to know.
Well, the rest is in the book. So friends, please go grab a copy of A Bold Return to Giving a Damn. It's a fantastic read. And as I told Will before we hopped on the show, I said, I feel like I've been with you all week because I've been reading your book. And if you want to feel like you're just sitting down with a cup of coffee, having Will share his story, that is this book. And it's also a wonderful depiction and reality check of the food system and why we need folks and farms like White Oak Pastures. So thank you for your work, Will. We're really appreciative.
I'm going to tell you this. So I didn't go out to sell a book. We were contacted by agents from Penguin, Viking House, Random House, Viking.
Mm-hmm.
And they contacted me and wanted to know, thought that this book would sell, and would I be interested in writing one? And I told them, thank you very much. No, I can't write a book. I hadn't read a book since I graduated from Georgia in 1976. I certainly can't write a book. And what makes me a pretty good farmer make me a horrible writer is I'm not linear. If I start telling you a story, I'm going to tell you a bunch of other stuff before I get to the story. I probably won't ever remember what the story was. That's just the way that works. It's not cool, and I can't help it. So they hooked me up with a young woman named Emily Graven, who is about your age probably, and just a sweetheart, about the same age as my daughter. I kind of fell in love with her a little bit. She spent a lot of time here. And we had a telephone date every Friday for a year. It's actually a little over a year. And it'd be from 1 to 3 hours. And it was painful for me. I loved Emily, but I dreaded like a trip to the dentist. She would, we like each other. We do all the how you doing sugars out of the way, and then it'd be, okay, let's go. And she'd ask questions, and she'd record it, and she was typing. And I would tell her something. She'd ask a question, and I'd tell her, and she'd say, wait a minute. That's not what you told me in September. What I tell you in September? She'd go back and read it to me and say, oh, that's a different deal. So the writing of the book, if it's not a good book, it's because I didn't tell her good stuff. If it is a good book, it's because she did a fantastic job.
She did a fantastic job. So yeah, I think it's a must read, honestly, for anyone who wants to ever eat a bit of meat in their entire life. I think it's that important. So Will, can you share with our audience where folks can find more about White Oak Pastures, either a website or a social media, etc.?
I think we got a pretty good website, whiteoakpastures.com. And then there's Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff that y'all do that I don't know how to get on. So, I know we got people spend a lot of time working on it, so I know it's probably all right. They'll call me to come to the office to comment on something so they can put it on there. But I never get to it to see it.
That's amazing. And then you do tours, right? You have people come out and visit. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is an increasingly important part of business. Where I'm sitting right now, Bluffton, Georgia. I'm in the middle of Bluffton, Georgia. Is 50 miles from the nearest Walmart. You can't do that many places in the United States, but we are. So it's very remote, very impoverished county. But we really love having people come to the farm. So we have built a restaurant and a general store and lodging. And we've got people that give tours. And we started a nonprofit 501c3 called CFAR, Center for Agricultural Resilience. We have training sessions on this kind of farm. And we've got an intern program. We take 6 interns 4 times a year for 3 months.
Hmm.
So there's a number of ways that people which we try to make the farm as approachable as we can.
Mm-hmm.
How does one apply for that internship? Is that something on the website, I'm guessing?
It's on the website.
Right on.
Yeah.
What kind of work is this intern likely going to be doing?
Yeah. We put a lot of they, and my folks that run it, put a lot of thought into it. It's involved a lot. But it's we pay them. It's not much. We don't charge them, and we do pay them, but we don't pay them much. Got to get them covered on the workers' comp.
Hmm.
But the 12 weeks is divided up into, I think it's on the website, but 2 weeks with beef, 2 weeks with pork, 2 weeks with lamb, 2 weeks in the garden, whatever. And it's a good deal for us. We don't get a lot of work out of them. They work, but because we're putting them where they're supposed to schedule to be that week, I'm not putting them where I need them.
Mm.
But what it's done for us is so many of our employees came off the training. Had that 6 weeks to get to know them, 3 months, 12 weeks to get to know them, and we either fall in love with them or we thank them so much for coming. And we got many of our managers came off that internship program. I really like it a lot. When I designed the program, I did that myself a long time ago. I did it in self-defense because we had people that would come here and say, "Hey, I want to come here and work, and I can be here 3 weeks, and then you have to pay me. Then I got to be gone, then I'll be back." I can't do that. If you get hurt here, I got to have workers' comp. You got to be an employee. So I sat down and designed an intern program to run folks off. I charged them like $2,000 or $3,000, and I paid them, but I charged them. I made it not real attractive, and people came anyway. And I wound up falling in love with some of those interns. So I dropped the cost. I said, I'm not going to charge them anymore. For free. It's pretty competitive. We get 20-something applications every quarter for 6 openings. So you can, screen them pretty good.
That's awesome. So cool. Definitely check that out if you're looking for, I guess, a new or beginning in the farming industry. That's so cool. We know some folks, I believe, that have gone through the internship program.
I bet you do. We have a bunch of them through. Do you remember the name?
Yeah, Nathan, he used to kind of help us with podcasting stuff. And I think actually him and his family lived in an RV on like next to one of your cow pastures. They had 2 little kids at the time. Yeah. So he's a very tall man. You probably remember him for his height. Yeah.
Not the kind of cows.
Shout out to Nathan and Brooke Ann because they were there.
Yeah, not the kind of cows you're looking for.
No, you don't want the Nathan cows. No.
A lot of those guys stayed here for a while.
So cool. Well, Will, thank you so much for sitting with us today and sharing your wisdom, lessons learned, and some of the future, the things that you've got coming on. I know that we as a family and as parents around the country, we all want to do a good job. We want to see our kids, kind of follow in our footsteps, but do it better than us, right? And I think that you've done a magnificent job, and how cool it is to not put pressure on your kids to do something, but see them show up and want to be. That's pretty awesome. So kudos to you.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. And with that, Will Harest has left the virtual chat once again. So good. I loved that. I loved hearing all about his family and legacy and the things he's got going on. Just that to me is pretty meaningful.
Well, it's so sweet that, you never really know, like, the personality behind, like, the cowboy, facade. Not that it's a facade, but, like, the front. And before we hit record, he's like, I can't think of a better way to end my Friday afternoon than sit down and record a podcast with you two. And he was, like, being so genuine.
At least he put off a good, it seemed like he was being very...
No, he was.
Yeah.
It's just such a sweet, he's thanked us multiple times for being interested in his work. And I'm just like, thank you for doing the work, so.
That's funny. He's the interesting one. And we're like,
yeah, I'm like,
thank you for, you're all day long, probably out there farming and working. And
decades.
And then these two chumps want to come chat you up.
Yeah, I love that we covered some things we obviously didn't talk about in the first show. And, if you're interested at all in his story, you got to go read the book. It's really that simple.
Book is great. I also read it, loved it, thought it was really great, and I think I love a good storyteller,
Mhm.
right? And he was talking about having what do you call it, a ghostwriter? Not a ghostwriter,
Well, she's not a ghostwriter per se, but I think she helped form a lot of the structure of the book.
There
But
you
it's
go.
him. The book is written in his perspective.
His voice,
He says,
totally. And
first person.
Will's a great storyteller. Tells a lot of awesome history of the farm, kind of growing up, and his parents, his grandparents, his great grandparents, and some of that
really
legacy
learn.
you get. It's great. So highly recommend. And definitely check Will out if you loved hearing from him. We got another episode of his that you can go look at as well. That's kind of more of some of his background, his starting, his life, and definitely a lot of different information there. So if you want to hear more from Will Harest from us or with us, go check that episode out. And go find him on Instagram, his website. Go do the internship. Go hang out with him. Go see what he's all about. And if you want to hear more from us, you can do that. We're on Instagram. We have those as well. At Homegrown_education, at Liz Hazelmeyer, and at Joey Hazelmeyer. You can find us on those accounts. We have a website, homegrowneducation.org, where we've got resources to educate you and your kids about real food. Getting your kids in the real food game early to help create some of those generational awareness, like this idea of like, hey man, there's like this natural selection going on with cattle and breed. It sounds like a really weird way to explain it, but man, we're trying to create a generation of kids that raise it up into adults that are just absolutely questioning in a very positive way, that are knowledgeable, that are confident about their food, about their well-being. And it starts with an education about, reality, right? And so we've created a lot of those resources for you to take your kids through at different ages. Go check them out on our website, homegrowneducation.org. We have a products business as well to kind of get you into some cleaner products that are less greenwashed. And again, all these efficiencies we're talking about, we feel that more than ever.
Oof. And I'm going to bet that the airing of this show will coincide beautifully with perhaps some new product drops, because I just spent a whole day with our photographer shooting a new line of ceramics. I think I'm going to do like a summer market situation, because a lot of this stuff is like things you want now in preparation for late summer's harvest. Fermentation crocks, like big ones where you can really ferment a lot for maybe your family. Really good, like just classic looking. It was funny, our photographer was like, some of this reminds me of like the old school Disney, like the loaf pan you would see like Snow White using, or the pie pan or whatever. And I love that classic, almost vintage look, but also it's made in Ohio. It's like lead-free ceramic, like beautifully non-toxic glaze, like everything that we're looking for in products to shorten the supply chain, know where your stuff's coming from, source stuff that will be able to be passed on to your next generation. That's kind of the vibe of Hazelmeyer Goods. Of course, there's things like soap and coffee that's more consumable, and we want you to enjoy that while that lasts. But everything is kind of run through the Liz and Joey, the Hazelmeyer. What are we looking for in a product?
Yeah.
And if we can't source something in a particular way, we don't offer that product, or we wait until we can. So that's super exciting. If you're interested, if you've been on the shop before and you haven't been on in a while, chances are high that there's some.
Go check it out for sure. Shoptheh.com. We have a discount code for that shop for homegrown listeners. It's homegrown.
It's just homegrown.
It's just homegrown.
10% off your order.
And 10% off your order at shoptheh.com. And we have a Substack where we release content for you, where we dive into some topics, and we might get a little bit more
vulnerable,
maybe a little spicy. If we are very long-winded and very open here on the podcast, and there's some topics that maybe are a little bit less. We don't want to get shut down by talking about some different topics that might get us censored. And some of those things we offer more in-depth conversations about on our Substack. So if you're looking to kind of get some of those more deep conversations of, what's going on in the brains of Elizabeth and Joey, if for some reason you really want to know that, well, good news. We've created an option for you to do that, and it's on a website we created, Substack, Homegrown Education. You can find it there. Sign up, $8 a month.
Yeah, we call them little coffee chats, and things that we want to share, maybe failures that we're currently experiencing in our own house, or how we've been duped recently by organic marketing, or kind of a way we're seeing the food cost conversation evolve. All of those things, 15, 30-minute episodes, they're shorter. We kind of get straight to the point, but they're important because oftentimes they're things that literally Joey and I are discussing as we're having morning coffee. And we're like, you know what? We should just hop on the mics. We should hop on the mics and talk about this because this is a sticking point in so many different people in our lives that we know about. And we want to talk about it. So.
I love it. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Substack, gosh, all the things, websites. Go check it out. And until next time, that's a wrap.